7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to Movie Time Machine, where we take movies from the past and relive them in the present. This week, we travel back to the year 1980, the film The Blues Brothers, directed by John Landis, starring John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. I'm your Time Machine host, Chad, and joining me today is Chris, Jamie, Casey, and, for the first time, James.
Hello.
All right.
Hello.
What up?
Welcome.
Thank you for joining me this evening. All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to go over a quick synopsis of the film. We'll go over some box office numbers. Then we'll go around the table. We'll do a quick review of the film. Then after that, we'll go over our top 3 quotes from the film.
All right, so I'm going to get us started here with the synopsis. So this is coming from IMDb. The synopsis is as follows. Jake Blues, just out of prison, puts together his old band to save the Catholic home where he and brother Elwood were raised. As far as taking a look here at the box office, actually a pretty small budget. So actually, I'm sorry. No, the budget was actually pretty big. So $27 million for budget as far as the 1980s go. That's pretty big. Opening weekend gross domestically, $4.8 million. Looking gross domestic was $57.2 million, and then worldwide gross was $115 million. So looking at a budget of $27 million and worldwide gross was $115. That's not terrible. That's a great return on investment.
Yeah, I know. I was just reading a big part of that budget was I think they purchased like 90 police cars or something like that, or 70 at $400 a pop. And I think what was it, the number of total cars wrecked for the film was like 106. Then when they did the Blues Brothers 2000, or the Blues, like the sequel that came out 2001, 2002, they wrecked like 207. It's like one more to break the record or something like that.
Other notable movies that came out in 1980, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, The Shining, Airplane, Raging Bull, Friday the 13th, Elephant Man, Caddyshack, a few others that are notable is Cheech and Chong's next movie.
Can I just say that 1980 is a pretty awesome year for film? Like, I'm just going down the list here, like, just some personal favorites of mine I think are really great movies. Like, we got Empire Strikes Back, 9 to 5, Stir Crazy, Airplane, Any Which Way You Can. You guys seen that film?
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood. Right? Was it Right Turn Clyde?
Yeah. That was a good one.
That was on TV all the time. Coal Miner's Daughter, Private Benjamin, Smokey and the Bandit 2.
Isn't Flash Gordon one of your favorite films of all time?
It is one of my favorites, actually.
I was told it was Blue Lagoon.
That movie's
Brooke
terrible.
Shields fan, right?
Smoking hot, though.
That you cannot deny.
What else? Caddyshack. I mean, the original Friday the 13th.
Look at that. Superman 2. I don't know, but as a kid, Superman 2 was significantly better than the first one, in my opinion.
Is that the one with Zod?
That's the one with Zod.
Yeah, I love that. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Christopher Reeve Superman.
Cruisin'.
Cruising for a Bruisin'?
No, Cruisin' with Al Pacino.
Have you actually seen this movie?
Have I? Yeah, but it was only once.
That's like, I dated this girl. No, she was from Iowa. You don't know her. Something interesting about some of the ones we were going through right there. I was thinking, like, how much of that from the 80s was like all SNL cast situations? Like, you look at Caddyshack. There's a couple in there
good
with
point.
John Candy. Not necessarily SNL. I don't think John Candy. You can correct me on that one, but definitely a part in.
Yeah, but
Blues
Chevy
Brothers.
Chase, though, he was on
Chevy
the
Chase
original.
for sure.
Yep.
In that early SNL.
But it looks like quite a few just comedies in general, like where that's where it started going. Like SNL came out 5 years earlier, and then we started seeing all these comedies that were a little bit out of the norm. So, and that's what turned into half the 80s movies we've seen and love.
Right, and I think John Landis, director, I think his star was on the rise too at this time because Animal House was 78, somewhere around there. It was pretty early, but this was not, maybe like his second or third movie. So I think you're right. This is kind of the sweet spot for all those late 70s, early 80s comedy directors and actors.
Yeah, you're definitely not wrong. Animal House was so 1978, so that was one of his first that came out. But Blues Brothers was his sequel to that. And then oddly enough, after that, then he went more horror, went American Werewolf in London.
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies.
also
Did they make
another
like
one.
500 of those films? Like
No, you're thinking of The Howling. You're thinking of The Howling. Yeah. No, American Werewolf is great.
Yeah, I remember that film. All right, anyone else have anything to add about movies in that year, 1980? All right, let's go around the table here and let's go and do our first impressions. And I'm thinking we're going to want to start with Jamie and end on this side with Chris and James from what I heard before we started recording. So
Fair enough. I'll keep the vibes positive to get us
right.
going. Yeah, no, this was my pick. I think my primary motivation was I'm a big horror guy, so I figured I should probably like step outside my own box and pick a comedy, just switch up the mood. But I don't know what it is about this movie. It's just kind of like it's like a Reese's peanut butter cup or whatever. You got like peanut butter chocolate. You got comedy, music. It's weird. Like nothing in this movie makes sense. And I think that I don't know. That's half the fun. Like you literally don't know what's going to happen if you've never seen it before. And they literally don't make movies like this anymore. Just let's crash 200 cop cars. Nobody has a plan. He's probably blowing through all his money, and just the primary goal is to make you laugh. Oh, and Ray Charles is in a musical scene right after Aretha Franklin. So you'll never see that again.
yeah, Casey?
Yeah, so Blues Brothers is one of my hands down top 10 favorite movies. I think it's especially one of my favorite comedies. I think it's a super funny movie. The thing that I find so funny about it is that all these characters, they're just especially Jake and Elwood, are kind of going through this whole chaotic mess that they're creating. First of all, to save $5,000 for the orphanage they were from, which they don't even like the nun at. They didn't even enjoy being at.
Penguin.
The penguin. The penguin herself. So this whole story is all about just $5,000 that they're trying to get. So they're bringing the band back together. And the crazier things get, it doesn't even like phase them. They just look. At one point, they're driving through a mall, commenting on the shops that they're seeing. Like, oh, they have everything here.
They have a Pier 1.
They're driving through a mall, and just everyone else reacts to this chaos in an appropriate manner. But they kind of go through the whole thing, living in this other world. And I think a lot of those scenes where things just kind of get crazy out of hand, cars just flying and crashing and all those things. It climaxes finally with that chaos of all those cars. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I just think it's a super unique, one of a kind type of comedy. You don't see movies made like that where you are mixing that same irreverent humor with a little bit of music from the era as well. Getting to a lot of R&B and blues and things like that. So star-studded, fun, family. Well, probably not a family affair.
Older family.
Uncles and aunts.
Yeah. All right, James.
Yeah. So first time seeing it, it's kind of one of those when you watch the movies like this and you realize like it came out, or it was clearly from in 1980 and first time seeing it, and it's almost 40 years later. Does it hold up? What are we thinking here? So for me, that's where I kept on thinking. I tried to go like deeper, like. Was Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin in this movie? Like, were they not allowed to be in movies? Like, was this music not something that was like really popular in movies then? Like, what was the situation there? And like, so I tried diving deep into that, and no, it was just it seemed like Dan Aykroyd just wanted to have a good time and put in things that he loved into movies. So in that aspect, I think it was a lot of fun. You're right. It was let's wreck some cars, let's listen to music, let's dance. Actually, that was the first thing that caught my eye. As the movie's going, credits are rolling, and as I'm watching, I'm like, choreography by, and it had whoever's name, and it was like, there's gonna be choreography in this movie. Like, what am I watching? Like, maybe this isn't what I think it's gonna be. And so then the rest of the movie, all I could watch is like Dan Aykroyd like doing these high knee kicks and thinking, I'm like, yeah, that was choreographed. He did this perfectly. Or like John Belushi doing whatever he does. And so, I mean, they clearly had a blast doing the movie. For me, it was just an okay film. But I can't deny how much fun they probably had making this movie. And clearly, from going box office gross, like that paved the rest of their way to do whatever they wanted as far as screenplays, acting, directing, whatever. So, I mean, good for them. Just wasn't necessarily my thing. I don't know if it's not going to be a go-to movie on a rainy day by any means for me, though.
Right.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with James on this. I think it looked like it was a movie that was a lot of fun to record and make and do. But as far as like, this is my first time viewing this, so I look at it and I thought it was a huge cast. I love Dan Aykroyd. I thought it was really cool. Yeah, to get Aretha Franklin, to get Ray Charles in there, to get James Brown. I mean, the musical acts that they were able to convince to be in this movie is pretty amazing, but it just kind of fell flat for me. I felt like there wasn't a lot. Casey, you were talking a little bit about like driving the story. I think it was more so like helping the orphanage, like not helping the orphanage, but helping like Curtis, that their guy that like it seemed like was kind of the individual that showed them the way and like showed them like who they were. But I feel like that was the driver, and like he was in that movie very little. I don't know. For me, it seemed like, yeah, it was just lacking depth and lacking some real driving pieces. But I mean, it was a fun watch. I would agree. I probably wouldn't, like, this isn't a movie that I would need to watch again or really like spend a lot of time like seeking out. I've seen bits and pieces of it, on TBS or TNT, but this is the first time I've seen it the full way through. And yeah, I just felt like throughout the entire movie, like it's a 2.5 hour movie, and I felt like it could have been done in an hour and a half, and that would have been a much better movie.
Yeah, I think the movie is long.
Yeah.
But if you just watch the theatrical version, it is only 2:15. The unrated's the 2.5 hour. Sorry, Chris.
No, that's fair. I did watch the extended version.
Okay. I watched the theatrical version, and I think I'd kind of fall in between both sides here of what we've heard so far. I think this movie really captures a lot of like what we see in like comedy films, like going into the 80s. Like there's some like the hijinks is very similar. Like when I think of like movies like Smokey and the Bandit or like Cannonball Run, there's something that's oddly familiar and similar between those films and that style of comedy. I do think it's a little bit long. There's some things that probably should have been cut out of it. But again, that might be just looking at it through like today's lens versus like, what that movie was at the time. But I think this movie probably is a very important film though for comedy of like what it opened up for the 80s and like a lot of great films that I think we got because of what this movie did. I do like it, but I think this movie is like, it's like great segments with like some filler like in between that doesn't really do much, I think, for the plot. I think this is a movie like I think you should see, but it's not like a movie that I'm going to go back and rewatch. Like there's, nothing that's going to drive me to go back and rewatch this film. The one of the more important things for me is just like the movie cameos, just like the talent, like the blues legends that are in this film. I think I probably saw this maybe I was like under the age of 10, so the weight of those characters in that film just didn't hit me until I went back and watched it again this time, so which I'm really glad I got to go back and actually feel that and see these characters in the film and just like, wow, I didn't realize who that was. I didn't remember that they were in this film. So yeah, so I kind of fall in between. I think I would recommend this film, like just for its history, but it's not something I'm going to go back and rewatch.
You talk a little bit about the importance of this movie and the importance of this comedy to kind of bridge that gap and allow for more comedies to come in the future. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts, because the way that I look at this, like this movie was just okay for me. If I were to make that argument, a movie that came out the same year, that would be Caddyshack. I think Caddyshack did it so
Yeah,
much
true,
better.
true,
And I think Caddyshack,
true.
like I look at Caddyshack and I can like that is a rewatchable movie for me. I can watch
Oh,
it
yeah.
all the time. I
Yeah.
think it's really funny. Like there are laugh out loud bits for me.
Right.
So I'm curious, like when you look at like both of those movies coming out in the same year, what is it about? And maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, and I don't mean to do that.
No, I
but
just
I'm
think it's
curious,
like it's
why do you
something
think
about
that
like
was
the
such
music in the
such a
film, and that's
pioneer
like
versus-
there's a reason why the music in that film I think has kind of stuck in like popular culture throughout the times, and that's something I just can't deny the fact of. But I do agree, like Caddyshack that's probably hands down like one of the best. It's up there with the upper echelon of comedies because
Yeah,
any
absolutely.
great comedies, modern comedies, I think you get like owes a lot to Caddyshack as well. Like Caddyshack, like I randomly just because I think it was just on Netflix not too long ago. It popped up on there, and I was just listening to like the first 15 minutes of that film, and like hearing like the detail like of every sentence of Chevy Chase and like those opening scenes, like it's just so fucking random, but it's just like comedy gold. So yeah, I do get what you're saying there. Caddyshack probably does hold more weight as far as like influence, but
But Chad, to your point, and here's the thing I was kind of thinking of as you were saying, like it was paving the way. As of when I was watching scenes for the first time, I again try to go back to this is an older movie. Like, is this the first time we've seen such things? Like the elevator scene, the girl from Ipanema in the background, and they're going up the elevator and seemingly taking 10 minutes to get to the 5th floor or whatever they need to get to. How many times does that happen in so many movies over the course of time now? Even like just the scenes where Belushi's doing like backflips like down like the center of the church, like to get up to the front, start dancing and things like that. Like all I kept on thinking was like Roger Rabbit and like anything that like Farley would do. It's just little things like that where I was trying to think outside of the box. Like, yeah, I could see where different scenes would portray or have been used in other movies. Like it might not have been the comedy gold Caddyshack was in writing necessarily, but the scenes were all there where everybody in that time and going forward like loved something about it, and they either used it again and perfected it or just used it because of the nostalgia. Who knows? But I could see that.
And I want to push back on you guys too, because not to be contrarian, but because Chris, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to go the other way with Caddyshack because I do love it, but it's not. It's number 2 to Blues Brothers number 1. I'm the opposite of you guys, and I think with that being said, Rodney Dangerfield, his scenes in Caddyshack are still funnier to me than anything in the Blues Brothers or Caddyshack. But yeah, I go the other way, and I don't have any real reason other than kind of what you guys were saying about Blues Brothers. It doesn't grab me in that same funny way as to whatever Aykroyd and Belushi are just doing, dancing around, being goons.
right. The thing with the Caddyshack though, you kind of made me think about this is like Caddyshack kind of has like one of those comedy. It's like one of those comedies that start out really strong, then they kind of wane towards like the middle, and like at the end like something like pops. But like where I feel like Blues Brothers has like a steady like it's kind of more steady throughout the entire film as far as like great comedy goes, which is like Caddyshack. I feel like really like lulls maybe towards like the middle, like half or middle of the movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, and not to pile on to that argument, but if thinking about Caddyshack, the main driving part of that movie, the teenage boy, in his summer job, yada yada. Honestly, that's the most boring part of the movie. You're watching that movie for Bill Murray, for Chevy Chase,
Right.
for Rodney Dangerfield. So the driving force of that movie, take it or leave it. Whereas the Blues Brothers, you're watching this epic car crash unfold in 2.5 hours, to your point, kind of long. But it really just kind of escalates. It's like a snowball going downhill where it finally culminates with that great crescendo at the end. And so I just think it's a really fun ride because it's kind of, you start off a little bit slow. You're going to the church, meeting with the nun, finding out you got cash you got to
Penguin.
go find. Thank you, Penguin. Getting the band back together. It just kind of slowly builds, and then it becomes kind of a race towards the finish line. So I think, again, not trying to compare the two because I love Caddyshack and I love Blues Brothers. But I could see that to be an argument as to, the driving force of Blues Brothers is the Blues Brothers. So I guess if you don't find them humorous and their kind of dry humor and vapidness where they're just kind of living this world and not really interacting with it in the same way the rest of us do. If you're not super, if that's not like funny to you, then I could see why the whole movie then would maybe fall flat. Whereas Caddyshack saved if you like at least 2/3 of the people in the movie.
Back to cultural like impact too. Like just looking at box office, domestic box office, Blues Brothers made almost $20 million more in the box office and it was in, let me see here, 500 something theaters, 594 theaters, and Caddyshack was in 656 theaters. So it was in like almost like 150 more theaters and still didn't make. I mean, I'm not looking at like timing of release too. That might have something to do with it, but just a little.
And Caddyshack didn't make as much money as the Blues Brothers?
Domestically for that year.
Really? That surprises me because as, you know, a millennial, I guess, to put a point on, you know, my era, decade, age, whatever. I'm under the impression that everybody has seen Caddyshack
They came
and their
out
father.
like a month apart.
Yeah, but
During the summer.
Yeah, but if Blues Brothers made more money, I guess I just grew up with the knowledge that everyone knew about Caddyshack and had seen it like 50 times, you know?
Right.
I think Blues Brothers were just so huge because of the SNL ties, because they were so huge. And that actually leads me to my next point, because Chris was saying, you know, you didn't see the importance of the movie, you know, what did it do for comedy? But I think the real big thing to remember is how huge John Belushi was back then. And if it weren't for things like this, and obviously his career was, you know, cut short. And if it weren't for things like this, I don't think we would have seen the popularity in the 90s of things like Chris Farley and Adam
Coneheads.
Sandler.
Well, that's you just threw out the week
Sure.
Yes, on purpose.
on purpose. Okay.
But just like some of those other stars, that kind of grew and kind of created the comedy scene that we've seen now. I mean, none of the Mike Myers, Austin Powers movies probably would have been made because that was another one of those same vein.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. Part of where my thought process is I feel like, and I would have to do some digging on this, but you're probably right in the regard of like that helped kind of pave the way. But I also think like Chevy Chase being in, I think Caddyshack was a way that like helped Chevy Chase really grow his career and like grow his prominence. And I think of like movies like basically like National Lampoons. You know, I know that John Belushi did Animal House, but I also think like one of the movies that I constantly go to is like, you know, Christmas Vacation, like European Vacation, like all of those movies. And I think that also had a huge portion of it, but I don't know like where they are within like the scope of like release and what had more influence over.
I mean,
So
less
more-
about the movies that came out, but more about like who he influenced and who came out because of him being an actor and finding success.
Sure, yeah, and I think like the Chris Farley, absolutely, and like the SNL crew, I think he was early, like him and Dan Aykroyd, were early to kind of be able to create that.
So what I'm taking actually out of this, Chris, is what good comedy is to you is it needs full frontal.
100%.
Okay, so full frontal nudity. Got it.
Yeah, that's why I love Forgetting Sarah Marshall so much.
That movie sucks. You know, like
Oh no!
Oh, come on.
King of unpopular opinions.
I hate that movie.
So you
You're
forgot
so
all
wrong.
about it then.
I did. I just lost my thought. I had. What I was just thinking of is that does anybody know like at this time and like again we're not like film school people, but like what were like comedians becoming actors, like was that as like
I think like again, like I couldn't speak to this really well, but it does feel certainly with that timeline of the 80s that SNL paved the way for comedians to have that opportunity to do that and then move into movies. Like they thought it was funny, everybody was loving
That's-
SNL.
yeah, it's the kind of
I think
feeling I
it's
get
much
just
of
from-
Casey's feeling
Yeah.
on that where everybody was like, what ideas were going on? So when you went like Caddyshack, it's like the same director as Ghostbusters. So clearly all these guys kept on working together, hanging out in clubs and just started talking stuff. Like how else would you figure out Ghostbusters if you weren't doing coke somewhere?
I may not have right. I mean my knowledge on comedians before 1980 is not great.
I don't know, like Pryor and
Well, yeah, but like
I'm thinking
so
like if
Pryor's
you go,
still like his prime though is probably more in the 80s, early 80s, I would say.
He had
Or
one
maybe, like,
70s
late
stand-up
70s,
special
yeah.
that was pretty famous. I
Yeah.
can't think of the name, but it
But
was
I
on
don't know,
Netflix not too long ago.
Was it Silver Streak that came out in 80?
I do know, James, I think you're right, because what what I've been doing lately is I have Hulu, and they have a bunch of old SNL seasons. They don't have all of them, but I just said, you know, what the hell? I'm going to start from season 1 because I'd never seen it. And it seems to be kind of like this great gathering place. I mean, episode 1 is George Carlin and Andy Kaufman each doing like 10 to 12 minutes, you know, more than once. So I think it did become this gathering place for all of these guys who suddenly had, you know, a platform and a stage to kind of get their comedy out there more broadly.
All right, just doing a quick reference. It looks like we have like Richard Pryor. He was in Silver Streak that came out in 76. But I mean, from my memory, like the comedians becoming actors things, I feel like 8.
Told you so.
No, well, like Steve Martin was kind of a thing in the late
The
70s.
Jerk.
The Jerk, yeah. And
Yeah.
but so that would almost say that, you know, Belushi and Aykroyd weren't really the first to come
SNL.
out of SNL, but
Yep.
Yeah.
you know,
That's a
they
good
certainly
call-out.
kept that going.
Yeah, it's a really good call out.
Awesome. I think this is the first time any of us have sat down and had like this big of a
Disagreement?
disagreement.
That's
different
good. We
opinions.
can't all be friends all the time.
That's right.
What
Cool.
were we disagreeing about? So just we were talking about like domestic gross and all that kind of stuff. One thing I was looking at on IMDb, just because it's not, I don't know if that's true facts or not. Sorry, I don't know if that's true facts or not. If I just to quote IMDb, but one thing I looked at in the trivia was, according to Dan Aykroyd, cocaine was included in the film's budget. So maybe that's
Oh
why it
yeah,
was so
I
expensive.
read that too. Yep.
Which I thought was a fun fact, maybe not disclosed, or they were just like, man, you guys must really love Pop-Tarts, like, and that's how it was under the budget. I just thought that was just a fun fact, that, or maybe that was a common practice, but on there they just said that Belushi enjoyed it the most, but also he thought it enhanced his performance, which I thought was also interesting because he had very little lines.
Right. Right.
Physical
Did he have?
performance.
Yeah. Lines on the page, right?
Makes more sense.
Yeah.
They were powdered donuts on the rider, I think.
Powder donuts make me go nuts. Yeah, another fun fact I came across was the mall scene. I think where that mall was located outside of Chicago, it had been closed down. And I think like the area that it was in, it was like lots of crime and not being able to keep any business in there. And so that's why they were able to set up like these shops, just run like rampage through this like actual mall. And I guess there's like YouTube videos out there of like people that have recreated that mall scene. We have to look it up, but it's out there if anyone wants to take a look at that.
Yeah, I was reading something about that mall scene too, and they were saying, it was an abandoned mall, so then they made it look nice, and everybody in the neighborhood got so excited because they thought the mall was reopening.
Oh, no.
And instead it was for this scene, and then apparently in that scene they caused more or a bunch of damage, or they didn't return it to the way the mall looked before they got in there, but there was no agreement that they would pay for damages because it was an abandoned mall, so there was like a fight going on back and forth until they finally just demolished the mall.
Wow.
Did anyone else notice the super meta thing going on? Like, they're in Toys R Us. That doesn't exist anymore. There's Pier 1. That's gone too. I don't know. I kind of had fun with that.
Thanks, Amazon.
Yeah.
Right?
Wah, 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 wah.
Since we're talking about fun facts, again, one more thing that I read I thought was interesting or just kind of fun was John Belushi had a tendency to go missing in from time to time at night and everything. So yeah, there was like one time where he was missing in a scene, and Dan Aykroyd was looking around and saw only one house in the area with lights on. So on a whim, walked over there, fully ready to knock on the door and be like, "Hey, I'm Dan Aykroyd. We're filming this movie," and this guy opens the door, and before he could even say a word, he's like, "You're looking for John Belushi, aren't you?" And apparently he got in. The guy said he came in and asked for a glass of milk and a sandwich, and then ended up crashing on his couch. And so that's
Wanted 4 fried chickens.
yeah, right. 4 fried chickens. So Dan Aykroyd dubbed him America's Guest after that.
Does anybody have like a favorite scene they want to share before we get into movie quotes?
It's not no further explanation than Ray's Music Shop. That musical number is my favorite by far.
A lot of choreography.
Yeah, there's your choreography. Yeah.
Casey?
Oh man, you know, I don't know that I have a favorite. I really actually do like the song and dance in the church, and then the whole, you know, seeing the light and that whole bit. I think that whole thing is just super funny.
Yeah, James Brown being the preacher.
Yeah,
that's
I
one of
love
my
that scene a lot.
favorite scenes.
Actually, my wife, before she went to sleep and we started watching it, she's like, "Is that guy wearing a wig?" And I'm like, "Dude," I'm like, "Babe, that's James Brown." And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's James Brown." I caught her off guard. I would say that the musical numbers for sure, clearly the best in the movie. The more arbitrary scenes, the Illinois Nazis, not that scene, but when they fly off the bridge and then are falling through Chicago, like from the height of skyscrapers.
Right.
I was just watching it. I'm like, how long is this gonna last? And how is the car staying so perpendicular? But it looked like it was a really great shot for the 80s. I'm like, man, Star Wars, watch out.
I've always loved you.
I know, and doesn't that scene too when they're like getting chased and they get to the end of the bridge and like the bridges collapse there and like the car like backflips.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the scenes that I really enjoyed the most was the scene where they were getting ready to introduce the Blues Brothers, or like basically they were stalling for the Blues Brothers, and they have like that big scene where they're doing the moochie whatever.
The moocher?
Yeah. And I love like they made it like look really kind of glitzy and glamorous, and then by the time it ends, you can kind of just see them like on the stage, and there's like very little there, and they're all just wearing their like normal clothes. I thought that was a really great scene. I really liked the song as well.
Yeah, I really like that scene. I like the James Brown scene too. I love James Brown being the preacher. But all right, that was awesome. Great review. Let's go around and let's do our favorite quotes from the film. We're going to do our top 3. We'll start at our number 3 and work our way up to number 1, and we'll just go around the table for each round. I'm going to go ahead and start this one off instead of always being the one that finishes.
Hey, you do.
So, all right. So my number 3 is "We're on a mission from God." I mean, that quote's in the movie like, you know, multiple times, but I just love it. It's one of those things I think in pulp culture is kind of stuck around. So yeah.
The way Dan Aykroyd says it, "We're on a mission from God."
God. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody know off the top of your heads? I didn't look it up yet. Like, where's Aykroyd from? Is it Chicago?
He's Canadian.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was trying to think from his accent. It was like he's got to be Canadian, but I never looked it up. But I was curious because of how. Yeah, he was God.
God.
Not too far off though on like the Chicago
Midwest.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jamie.
Me. Okay. Mine are in no particular order. My first one is when they're in the Soul Food Cafe, and Aretha Franklin says, "We got 2 honkies out there dressed like Hasidic diamond merchants." And then her husband goes, "Jake Elwood." That's my number 3.
That's pretty good. My number 3, it kind of goes along the lines that of my review earlier, where I just love it that they're so unaware of like what they're really doing and what's really going on around them. They just seem so absent-minded. It's a scene after they're, I believe, in the phone booth, and Carrie Fisher blows them up and they go flying. They land on the ground, and the first thing Elwood says, he looks over and goes, "Hey Jake, got to be at least $7 worth of change here."
You know about that scene too, like when she's shooting like the rockets, it's like laser fire from like Star Wars. It's like choo, choo, choo.
I think mine was super arbitrary one, but when they hit up the country music place, and they're like, "What kind of music do you usually have here?" The lady's like, "Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and Western."
Yeah.
And then they start playing the TV show theme songs. I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Rolling.
It also, that scene also led me to believe between that and Roadhouse that all bars in the 80s must have had chain link fence to block glass bottles.
Right.
That's kind of what I took from that as well.
I never
Country
knew
bars.
Glass bottles broke so easy in the 80s.
All right, so for me, my number 3 again, also in no like real order, but I thought when they were being chased towards the end, and they were saying, the dispatcher was saying, use of unnecessary violence in the apprehension of the Blues Brother has been approved.
For number 2 for me, same as James there, the country and western quote. It just sounds like something I would hear from my family. Growing up. What kind of music did you grow up with? Country and western, both kinds.
Okay, my 2 is a bit of a back and forth between Jake and Elwood, and it's super simple. I think it's one of my favorites because this is something me and my friends just say to each other. Shit. What? Rollers. No. Yeah. Shit. There's not much to it. I don't know. I think it's just something we say to each other. That's it.
That's perfect. My number 2, it's actually a lot of quotes because it's the scene where they're getting beat by the penguin because they keep cursing.
Oh.
But finally, I think it's Elwood falls down Jake falls out of the chair and they're being reprimanded for swearing and just goes, "Fuck this shit, man."
I really like when the penguin asks him, "What did you just say?" And he goes through the entire part. I thought that was pretty good.
So I guess only because it just caught me off guard with being a part of the movie. Like, where do Illinois Nazis come from? But for sure, the Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis. I don't know. It just those two had such great chemistry that when they did scenes like you just suggested, it just flowed so well together. Where they were just finishing each other's sandwiches.
For me, my number 2, I really liked when Jake got out. Elwood grabbed him, brought him to his apartment, and they're just starting to get comfortable, and the train keeps going by. And so Elwood asks, "How often does the train go by?" Or I'm sorry, Jake asks, "How often does the train go by?" And Elwood's response is, "So often that you won't even notice."
Awesome. All right. One of my last quotes is the where Elwood goes. "The 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it."
Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, that had to have been on the poster at some point, in its time, or the 25th anniversary. It had
It's
to
on
be right
the
there.
VHS cover.
VHS, is it
Is
really?
it?
I don't know.
I was going to say, it had to have been, right?
It's a great tagline. So I think my number 1, it just kills me. I forget it's in there. It's when I think it's the first chase, and John Candy and the cops land in the truck, and he's like, "Give me the mic. What car are we? 5-5. This is car 55. We're in a truck." That's it.
Yeah, so my favorite quote comes from the scene when they're in the restaurant trying to recruit one of the bandmates who's working there at the restaurant, and they're just trying to mess with all the rich people there. And at one point, Jake stands up, and I'm gonna do my best impression. He goes, "How much for the little girl? How much for the women?" And the guy's super confused, like, "What?" And so he just keeps going with it. "Your women. I want to buy your women. The little girl, your daughters. Sell them to me. Sell me your children." It's just so absurd, just that they're messing with all these rich people in such a crazy way.
Yeah, I really don't. The first one that Chad said about 160 miles to Chicago, I think that one really just caught my attention throughout the rest of the movie. I kind of wish it was earlier, and I was like, oh, something's going to be happening. It's going to be awesome. But they did save it for the end, and it was great. But I thought if it was earlier, I think it would have set up the tone for the rest of the movie in some way.
All right. Chris?
All right, my final one. I really, really liked when they, towards the very end, when they were doing their singing for the, for kind of the banquet or whatever, like when they're playing in the barn or whatnot, and all the cops roll in and they finally notice them. And so then they make sure, the Blues Brothers make sure that they acknowledge them by saying, "And we'd like to especially welcome all the representatives of the Illinois law department community that have chosen to join us here in the Palace Hotel ballroom at this time." And I think it's just really tongue in cheek, and continues to show kind of their just absurdness.
All right, awesome. I just had one more I wanted to mention here was the it's like when they're trying to get the band back together, and I can't remember which character was, but they're talking about how good their band used to be. He says, We had a band powerful enough to turn goat piss into gasoline. All right. Does anyone else have something they want to add about Blues Brothers, or you said your piece?
Said my piece.
Yeah, it's a decent movie.
Did anyone see Blues Brothers 2000? I've never seen that
Awful.
movie.
Awful.
Do not waste your time.
Okay.
Awful.
It does nothing but terrible things to the name of Blues
I
Brothers.
didn't get
I'll
past
skip
the movie poster. That's that awful.
Just to give you some perspective, so it's not
Isn't John
obviously the
Goodman in
same.
that?
John Goodman and one of the there's like 4 Blues Brothers in this one, and one of them is a child. So it's
Ooh.
almost like an awful kids movie remake of it.
Like
Understood.
the Disney version.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, guys, for.
It'd be cool, like the
clear
kid
that
was
one.
like doing lines of coke.
Well, I mean, he probably was.
You got to get on the level, kid. Fun fact. Actually, this didn't get mentioned that Frank Oz, Yoda, was the guy giving back all of his stuff in the very beginning, like going, "Here's your contraceptive, unused. Here's a used one," which also was a funny scene. But that was Frank. That was Yoda.
Oh wow, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Sweet. Do you know who Yoda is, Chris?
Who?
It's funny that a few of you have said you don't think it's a rewatchable film, because there was probably a 6-month period where I watched this movie once a month. I will watch this movie all the time. I love this film.
What age though?
Like a few years ago.
I'm with you on that,
Maybe
Casey.
6 years ago, in my 20s. I actually never saw it when I was a kid. I found this in my 20s.
I'm with you on that. I could watch this every year, every couple months.
I'll give you a pass. That's why I was kind of curious when everybody watched some of these things. Like, I appreciate the chat said like what 10 you thought.
I was pretty young. I was probably like 7, 8.
Yeah, no, I actually. The funny thing is, I saw Blues 2000 before I saw this, hated it, and then didn't give this one the
And
time of
chose not
day.
to watch
Yeah,
it.
found this as an adult, and I love it.
Because I could say on a similar situation a couple years back, I actually found Goonies for the first time, which everybody had seen. But then I watched Goonies probably like once a month because I loved it.
It's so good.
So good. So good.
I don't really like. No, I'm just kidding. I love Goonies.
I was
Chris, do you have
waiting
anything
for
to
Chris Goonies?
Chris doesn't like
Unpopular
the Goonies. does he?
take.
Come on, unpopular opinion?
Hold on. Everybody describe Chris's facial expression. Grimace?
No, I haven't seen it in its entirety. Like what I've seen on TBS, it seems really kiddie. It seems all right.
Man, you watch a lot of TBS.
Not a sponsor. Hashtag not a sponsor.
As a kid, absolutely.
It's the only channel we had.
It's a
Are you smarter than a 5th grader? Reruns. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Well, thank you. That concludes our episode, our look into the movie The Blues Brothers. If you have any thoughts, comments, you want to join in or chime in on your thoughts on the Blues Brothers, send us a message at Movie Machine Pod on Twitter. That's at Movie Machine Pod on Twitter. Thank you and good day.